Hey everyone, how's it going? My name is Ben, welcome back to the channel. This little guy is Milo. Before we jump into today's video, I wanted to introduce him. He's our new little adventure buddy. His favorite things to do right now are running around in the backyard and romping in the sprinklers when they're turned on, and napping all day so that he can keep his parents up all night. Yeah, isn't that right, buddy? Oh, he's the sweetest little pup ever though, and he's gonna be such a great adventure buddy. All right, let's have you go play with Mom. What do you think? All right, so today we've got an install for you. Arguably, it's one of the cheapest and easiest mods you can make, and it's probably something I'd even highly recommend as one of the first mods to your rig. And if I'm being honest, it's actually the first mod that I bought for the 4runner. I just ended up letting it sit on the shelf for a while. It got packed up for a couple of moves even, because, well, I can be a bit lazy. But laziness is no excuse for ruining your diff. You can tell, I guess, how long this has been bouncing around in the garage by how beat up the box is. Laziness is no excuse for ruining your diff and quite possibly shelling out tons of cash for an expensive rebuild or replacement, especially when you know that it could have been prevented with just a $75 kit off Amazon and a pretty simple install. So that's right, today we're getting down to business with the ARB Diff Breather install on the 4runner. Now, I know what you're asking. What's a diff breather? Why do I need one? If it doesn't make my rig look cooler, shouldn't I spend that money on some lights or something? These are all valid questions, believe me, and I get where you're coming from. But allow me to quickly break it down Barney style for you. Your differential connects the drivetrain to the wheels via some fairly sophisticated gearing. It earned the name differential because it allows your wheels to spin at different speeds. See what they did there? But if you don't really care about any of that, then you can simply think of your diff as the thing underneath your rig that always seems to hang a bit lower than you remember it. And when you say to yourself, yeah, I've got plenty of room to go right over that rock, before inevitably hearing a smack and having a wet pants moment, you can pretty much bet it was your diff that took the blow. And the only thing to know about your diff is that it's full of moving parts, bearings, gears, oil, and those moving parts get hot. And when you hit that water crossing in the trail and stop to get that shot for the gram, you're dunking your hot diff into cold water. And as Seinfeld taught us, this is a classic recipe for shrinkage. In the case of your diff, that means contracting and trying to suck in air. But if the stock breather valve is underwater, or the seal around your diff or your axle seals become the path of least resistance, you're in for a world of hurt. Oil and water don't take to mixing too kindly. So again, for $75 and a little bit of elbow grease, it's best we just nip this in the bud and avoid that situation altogether. This diff breather kit is basically just a hose and an air filter. The hose should be long enough to allow you to run it to a point where it'll stay clean and dry. We'll take ours up to the engine bay. You could likely piece together your own kit from your local hardware store or your local aquarium shop, and maybe it'll save you a few bucks. But I'm lazy, and I like the convenience of grabbing this kit off Amazon and having everything I needed in one box. So let's dive into it, shall we?
So inside the kit, we've got the manifold block, the air filter, an 8-meter length of tubing, 4 shark bite fittings for the tubing, 3 plugs for the extra ports in the manifold, and ARB even throws in a bag of zip ties. The only tools we'll need are a 14mm wrench for removing the stock breather valve, and a 13mm wrench for installing the fittings from the kit. Oh yeah, you'll probably want a beer handy too. So the first thing we'll be doing is running the tubing. Before we do that, we'll want to tape up both ends just to prevent any dirt or grime from getting in there. To pull the tubing up into the engine bay, I'm using the tool that came with the 4runner for dropping the spare tire. It's the perfect length, and the hook on one end makes it easier to do by myself. You could also use a coat hanger or measuring tape or something like that. Just get creative with it. All we've got to do here is find a good spot to run the tubing. I'm going back by the firewall near where my dual battery normally sits. I pulled the battery just to give myself some extra room to work. With your long stick in the right place, Simply get under the rig and tape your tubing to it so you can pull it up through the engine bay. Now it's time to mount the manifold block. We'll make a quick drill template with a piece of tape. Position it where you'd like and drill your holes. I used an 1/8" drill bit to make some pilot holes for the self-tapping screws. Before we mount it, we'll assemble the manifold. We're only running one breather line to it, so we'll install one of the shark bite fittings and fill the other 3 holes with the plugs. Now we're ready to mount the manifold block with the provided screws. And with it mounted, we can pull the tape off the end of our tubing and press it into the fitting. Firmly press down on the tubing until you feel the fitting engage with a pop. And finally up here, we just need to install the air filter. Take note though that the plastic face spins freely, so if you're standing there an hour later wondering why it isn't tight yet, well, there's why. And now we can head down to the diff. Simply locate and remove the stock breather valve with the 14mm wrench. The valve sits on top of the diff towards the driver's side. It's fairly easy to spot. Now grab one of your shark bite fittings to install. With your 13mm wrench, just get it nice and tight. And once the fitting's in place, simply grab the end of your tubing and insert it with a firm press. You'll want to feel it pop into place just like before. So this install is really as simple as that. Connect the breather line at both ends. Make sure those shark bite fittings, you only get one chance at them, so push them in, feel that good pop, know that they're secure. Now this is an 8-meter long hose that ARB gives you. Do you need the full 8 meters? Probably not. But the one real key thing here is back at the diff, we're going to leave a big service loop. So that way, even if our rear end is at full droop and we're articulated weird, there's not going to be any strain or pulling on that hose. That also means that back here, right by the diff, we're not going to zip tie anything really tight. If you know things are going to flex and move, it's always a good idea to keep the zip ties a little bit loose. So that way the hose doesn't get pulled out of the fitting. That would totally negate the purpose, and you'd probably have a bad day. So really all that's left here is for me to get to zip tying, and then we'll call it a day. We'll see you in a bit.
Well, there you have it. If that is not one of the easiest mods you can make to your rig, I don't know what is. If I had to estimate, I'd say 20 minutes to actually install the manifold and the filter up in the engine, as well as change out the breather valve on the diff itself. And then probably another 20 minutes just to run the hose and zip tie everything in place. That probably is the hardest part of this job, is figuring out where you're gonna run the hose, where you're gonna put the zip ties. The only things to keep in mind there are, even though the hose is, automotive grade, temperature rated, keep it away from your exhaust. You definitely don't wanna say, oh, hey, that's a great straight run to zip tie it to. And also the other big important thing is back at the diff, make sure you leave a big service loop. Don't trim your hose to size, just loop it up so that way when you're articulated, when you're at full droop, you've got plenty of hose to spare. And as you get closer to the diff as well, keep those zip ties a little bit looser just so that there is room for that hosing to move should you need it out on the trail. All right, just as we're losing daylight, I think that'll do it for this video. I'll be sure to leave a link in the description below to this ARB Diff Breather Kit. I think it is super worth it. It's like 75 bucks, but to have everything you need in one box is totally convenient. If you've got any questions about this install, be sure to drop them in the comments below and I'll get back to each and every one of you. And of course, if you enjoyed this video, it is always a huge help to give it that thumbs up. And if you're new here, maybe consider subscribing and sticking around for a while. That way we can bring you on our next adventure. Until next time though, get out and explore somewhere.